I am here with Brent Roberts, who is a professor of psychology at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And he is also the OG conscientiousness wizard, one of my many titles for him. And we're here to talk about conscientiousness, the trait that everybody wants, but no one can seem to get. Many people want. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to hedge my statement there. Many people want to increase conscientiousness. So why don't we start with just what is conscientiousness for people who are not psychologists, not experts? What does conscientiousness entail?
Most people would understand it but under the term grit, which is a more popular, shorter, and much more effective marketing of the idea. And so everybody kind of intrinsically understands what grit is. Yeah, it's your willingness to work hard and to persist in the face of often setbacks and the like. That's one aspect of conscientiousness. Other aspects are, whether you keep your desk neat and clean and things tidy around your house. That's the organization facet. There's also your ability to inhibit your impulses. So if you really can't stop eating the cake or something like that, that's what we think of as impulsiveness, which is the opposite of conscientiousness. There's responsibility, which is your propensity to follow through with promises, to remember those birthdays, to do good things for other people on a schedule, so to speak. There's also kind of a conventional aspect to it, like following rules. So people who really like to follow the rules and will be aware of them, those folks are also higher conscientiousness. So I think of it as a family that all kind of go in the same direction and they go a little bit together, but it all have to do with kind of trying to achieve goals and trying to inhibit bad things. And that's why I think to qualify your claim that everybody wants it, young people usually don't, but as you get older, you usually do.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. You start to need to achieve the goals to pay the mortgage.
yeah.
You mentioned grit, and actually, when I interviewed Angela Duckworth, she she acknowledges that grit and conscientiousness are similar, but she does not say that they are the same. And she
They're the
also said,
same.
like, okay, so how are they? They're the same basically to you?
Well, I mean, it's a facet of conscientiousness. And grit really hits on what we think of as the industriousness component, the hardworking component, the persistence and goal setting aspect. And, so from our vantage point, we look at the correlations between grit and conscientiousness in that space. They're pretty much the same thing. When we look at what they both predict and whether grit gives you anything different, it doesn't.
So why is conscientiousness associated with seemingly everything good, like living longer and making more money,
Kind of wish
and
I
all this other
knew.
stuff?
So, I mean, I have to admit, I mean, I backed my way into the study of conscientiousness. I was interested in it because it was a developmental thing. It actually increases with age, and I was like, wow, that's fascinating. I wanted to know why. And then as we started exploring the space a little bit more, we kind of got like, oh my gosh, it relates to everything good. So, like when you're a kid, kids who are more conscientious do better in school, and so they're studying, they're working harder in classes, they're getting better grades, then they're getting asked to go to higher education, and they're finishing their college degrees. And so, from that perspective, it's good, at least from a societal perspective. It plays out in work where people who are more conscientious tend to be seen by their supervisors as better employees. So they actually perform better on the job. It's not only work, but it's also love. People who are more conscientious tend to have more stable, long-lasting marital relationships or just stable relationships, which are all very good for us, health-wise and the like. Then it predicts health. People who are more conscientious tend to avoid some of the issues, especially in young adults. They don't drink as much, they don't do as many drugs, they exercise a little more. They tend to listen to what people say about what should be eaten, and so they tend to have better physical health. And then that results in a not so confusing relationship with longevity. And we try to figure out how and why. And obviously, there's some kind of behavioral things, like they tend to do things that help avoid some of the potholes in life. Like I always like to give the example of, like, I am not a neat and organized person. And so back in the day when we used to publish things on paper, my office was a wonderful Byzantine stack forest of different things. And I would, like, somebody say, hey, could you remember that paper? And I go, oh, yeah, yeah. And suddenly I'd be there going through stacks for 45 minutes, frustrated, trying to find out where that paper was because I couldn't find it. And an organized person would avoid that 45 minutes of pain and suffering, right? And so
Right.
they wouldn't go through that stress and they wouldn't have that problem. The organized and conscientious person doesn't get into the fight with their partner that
Mm.
results in the stress. because they've actually put the seat of the toilet down, or they've cleaned the kitchen, or they've done the thing. And so there's conscientious people avoid a lot of the pitfalls. And then of course, because they tend to do things that are rewarded by lots of things in society, either your bosses or partners, they tend to experience better life satisfaction, but not necessarily happiness per se, but just like more positive outcomes too. So that combination is pretty profound. You avoid problems, and you get goodies from the world. And money doesn't buy a whole happiness, but it does keep a whole heap of trouble off the front porch, as they say in Oklahoma. So
That
and
is
I think
true.
conscientiousness works that way.
So the $1 million question, can people increase their conscientiousness? And if so, how?
If you believe our studies, yes. Yeah, we've done some work trying to intervene, as have some other people. I mean, in fact, on the grit front, some economists tried to train some second graders to be gritty, and they succeeded, and that was impressive. And not only did they succeed, but the kids who got more gritty or conscientious did better on their grades 2 years later. So, and the training programs are relatively straightforward. I mean, I think in terms of anybody's desire to change conscientiousness, there is more out there, especially in the work world, to
Mhm.
work on these things. Time management programs, organizational programs, goal setting programs, the what to measure type folks, the David Allen folks. There's just tons and tons of intervention systems that are designed to work on conscientiousness. It does not take any work to actually find it. It's usually not labeled at this point as something to change conscientiousness, but it does, and it's what you would work on. So set your goals better, organize your goals better, give yourself some accountability systems so that when you actually achieve things, you celebrate and you actually track what you do. The basic goal setting theory, for example, is exactly what you would do to increase somebody's conscientiousness. We have lots of programs for that. And what I'd recommend is that people go to those. And the real question is, do you follow through?
Right,
which
right,
is
right.
which is being conscientious. And
Yes.
so, yeah. For those of us who are not conscientious, yeah, there's a follow through problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked with some experts who work with kids and adults with ADHD. And it's like, yeah, we teach them how to create Google Calendar reminders and a
It's
to-do
true.
list. And I was
It's
like,
true.
that's it. That's the secret.
That's
And
it,
it's
man.
like,
That's
yeah.
it. Yeah, yeah. There's no secret there, man. And unfortunately, it is kind of just a little bit hard work. I mean, I am sympathetic, and I have benefited greatly from some of the skills that the consultants teach in terms of like that, like organizing your to-do list. Like for years, I did a completely ridiculously stupid to-do list, which was not a to-do list, it was a project list, which was, of course, a psychological burden because you never
Hmm.
get your projects finished. And so every day I'd open up my to-do list and it would remind me of how inadequate I was. I'd get depressed, close it, try to ignore it. And I went through some of the books. I was, oh, so you should do a to-do list each day on things that you're going to get done that day. I thought this was amazing until I turned to my wife and I asked her about it. And she'd been doing it for decades.
Yeah.
And just hadn't shared it with me. I felt a little bit hurt. But just that little simple thing, right? It's just the knowledge that you shouldn't put a list of things that you're going to get done in 10 years as your to-do list. You should do things each day that you can get done. And the feeling of like, oh, you cross off those three things and you got them done. It's like, oh, that's really good.
Yeah.
And that's not a profound thing, but for me, it was something I didn't know. And learning that by reading a book helped tremendously on that. And the other idea of like getting things out of your head, not
Mm-hmm.
using your own brain to organize all your information, which, as I can attest, as you get older, becomes less capable. It's really good to park your brain someplace else on a list, someplace out there where you don't have to keep it in mind, so to speak.
Yeah, a lot of people think conscientious people are just somehow better at remembering things or just somehow yeah, I don't but I'm very conscientious and I'm actually not good at remembering things, but I write everything down and I put a calendar. If Google goes down, I truly cannot do anything that day, but like I if it's up and running, I can do whatever. Um okay, $1 billion question is conscientiousness declining? And the background for this, for people who don't know, is there was a Financial Times article recently that purported to show that there has been a decline in conscientiousness among younger people. So people, I think, younger than 40 or something like that. where normally, you would expect them to be this level of conscientious, instead they're down here, and that this has been, I guess the author of this article suggested that this is because of the rise of cell phones. And I'm wondering what your take is on that.
What we see pretty reliably are people increasing in conscientiousness, especially in young adulthood. It's the period where you see the largest increase for the most part. We've done these studies where we pooled lots and lots of studies to test this. And reliably, we have found there's an increase in conscientiousness, especially from adolescence through middle age. And so this finding or this result, which hasn't been peer reviewed, hasn't been published per se, is unique in the sense that it seems to contradict the general trend we see in some other data. And so, there are a couple of questions come up. Was his depiction or finding correct? Which is, I think, a fair thing to ask. Is it consistent with what we found before? And does it replicate in other things? Would be the kind of way I'd break it down.
Why would there be a decline in conscientiousness in one sample, but not in other studies or other samples?
So there's a wonderful study in the Netherlands called this study. Same period, tracked people over time, and asked a bunch of the Dutch their responses to the yes/no questions on personality inventories. And that sample, starting in 2014, people increased in conscientiousness, and it didn't actually decrease at all until just recently. There's another study called the NLSY, the National Longitudinal Study of Youth, that also tracked conscientiousness during the period. Lo and behold, did those people go down? No, they kind of went up a little bit, went down a little bit, mostly were flat.
Hmm.
In our data where we track people over a longer period of time, it was really kind of cool. Do people start going down in 2014 or so? A little bit, just much smaller. But what was really cool is we have history in that data all the way back to 2020, or not 2020, 2000. And you see that actually people were increasing, and that the peak year for people was 2014. And then so there's this little bend down. But it was like, oh, so now they've come back down to where they were in 2000.
Hmm.
So, if you bother to look at other data sets, uh, you don't see the same pattern. And
Hmm.
in the aggregate, there's nothing so dramatic as to lead you to conclude that people have fallen off a cliff, so to speak, when it comes to conscientiousness.
Hmm. I don't know what to make of the cell phone explanation. I mean, so one point is that, like, according to you, like, this effect doesn't show up in other studies. So basically, other studies don't suggest that people are becoming less conscientious.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the same thing that's gone on with the cell phone argument repeatedly. If you say, it's affecting the people this way, and you find another data set in which it doesn't happen, it's a pretty good test of your idea. And so I looked to the list study, the one done in the Netherlands, was a really nice control study to in the sense that it's the same sample. It's Westerners. It's got young people in it too. The Europeans, if anything, were using smartphones before us, if it's going to be happening there. But I mean, if you take these other samples that had the same young people over the same period of history, and you do not see a decrease, it's a really good counterfactual. And it really says, look, you should not conclude that the easy answer, which is smartphones, is the right answer. You should look elsewhere, would be my argument.
One interesting thing about smartphones is that I actually think the phone era has made me more conscientious. So if you think about before we had smartphones, and I will just paint you a picture for anyone who's, like, not old.
Wait. I'm the old one in this
You're
conversation.
you're
I should
you're
be.
old. I
I
am
should be.
also so old.
I mean, I got rotary phones in my history. Come on, man.
Yeah, when you call someone, you're like, yeah.
I got it.
So before I had a smartphone, I lived in LA, and I driving everywhere, and I was driving to interviews. So I would look things up on MapQuest, which is a website that existed, and then I would print out the MapQuest directions, and then I was driving and staring at a bad printout of a bad map that, like, turn right on La Cienega, and I would inevitably miss this, like, tiny 12-point font, print with the ink running out, and, like, run late to my interviews. And people would get mad, and they'd be like, why are you late? Or, like, my professors were like, you're constantly late. because I was a terrible driver and I didn't have this tool of conscientiousness, which is Google Maps talking at
Yes.
me from my phone.
Externalizing your conscientiousness. Yeah, right.
Right.
I mean, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's like one example, but everything, my phone reminds me when I have an appointment. My phone reminds me when I have something on my to-do list. Like, it can be a tool for distraction, but like, not to be a techno optimist, but it can also be a tool to help you get things done. I mean, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a human nature accelerant.
Yeah, I guess.
It can do lots of things, but mostly it makes things, yeah, bigger.
Oh, that's interesting. So like, whatever your thing is, like, it's gonna enhance that thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because other people lament the smartphones when it comes to things like social interactions and stuff. And I saw it with my kids, where I mean, we had a particular setup where they were in school districts that separated them, so they didn't
Hmm.
see each other after school. Where so you didn't go to your neighborhood school, you went to something different. But then they got on, social media in some sense, usually Minecraft, and then played each other all afternoon with a group of kids who would have never been interacting because
Hmm.
of the physical situation. And yet they continued to have the social interaction because of the digital space and did so in quite a way. They also had bad experiences with people on, on that platform. But then, I also saw them interacting verbally so much more than, so I used to wait by the phone because we didn't have even a recorder. And so you're
Hmm.
like, my friend Tom going to call me and I can go do something. Wait, 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 nothing happens. We're not, now they, text each other and say, hey, why didn't you text me? And then they would have a discourse that would be, from my perspective, maybe it's because I'm male, but there, that was rich in terms of the social exchange and emotions. And, and they got really good at saying, hey, you hurt my feelings, and oh, I'm sorry. And the
Hmm.
sophistication of the social interaction was far beyond 12-year-old or 14-year-old or something like that. And it was just simply because the base rate of interaction was so much greater. And
Hmm.
so I saw the social interaction accelerating the good things as much as the bad things. And so, yeah, it's humans, man. We're just using a vehicle. So I think the idea to paint all the problems of society into that little box is let's say looking askance to the real problem, which is us.
The problem is you. Yeah, that's an inspiring message. What do we need to do
Depends
to
on your view of
determine?
human nature.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, yeah. So how, like, what is the final, like, what would we need to see in order to know if conscientiousness is actually declining or not? Or do you feel like we already have that settled, which is that it's not?
I mean, I'm more than willing to entertain the possibility. I was at a meeting and somebody told me about a data set that they were looking at. And in that data set, they saw a decline in conscientiousness too. And it might be, for example, that with more data, we'll see a more of a trend. I would be really surprised if the pandemic, for example, didn't have some kind of consequence for us, for example, of things that might happen either because of the insults to our physical health that perpetuate over time, because we know if you don't feel as well physically, you don't feel as conscientious, so to speak. Not to mention the kind of interruption it had to a lot of people's life courses in terms of their attachment to education or their ability to get a job or to really work on their lives, so to speak. We all had to set aside things for a while. Be really surprised if there wasn't some effect. And so we still need more data per se. But I do think it's problematic, especially in the social science space, especially in a place where there's lots of data to conclude based on one sample that this is a generalizable phenomenon. That's problematic. And I would say it's easily shown that it's not currently generalized. But I'll also be contradicting myself if I would say it might not turn out that way. I mean, we are in a data space and we are working with social science data that we have to be somewhat humble. You don't want to take one study and rely on that. You want to accumulate the data and you want to keep your mind open to the possibilities. At this point, given what I've seen in data, and it's across lots of longitudinal studies, at least a dozen, there is no general decline. There is no free fall conscientiousness in young people. You see it in some cases, sure. Did it happen in the Understanding America study? Yes. I would not say that the data was wrong or that it doesn't exist. There is a sample of folks in that study that did go down. Do we know why? No. I mean, there are really particular things about that sample that might explain it, but we haven't actually done the work to figure out why. We will do that, and in 5 years we'll publish a paper. We might have an answer then. But at this stage, I would say to not worry about society declining because conscientiousness is plummeting off the cliff, based on the data that we see.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. This was so fun as usual.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's good to see you from
Yeah.
Germany.
Yeah, great to see you.
Great
Auf
to see you.
Wiedersehen or whatever.
Sprachen Sie Deutsch?
No, just that. I've seen The Sound of Music.
Fair.